Basically, what Iran is asking for, Pepe, basic, points are the cessation of war on all fronts.
on
Just
all fronts.
stopping this war is not. I think that could be achieved by these talks. I'm talking about Lebanon. You cannot leave Lebanon alone. They're part of what's going on. That's why the Iranian government, they're gonna. That's why that's the first point, by the way, in the 10-point plan.
In the 10th point.
They're basically, the first point is that. Then they're talking about other Strait of Hormuz sanctions. I think finally what we're gonna get with this negotiations, and Donald Trump is not capable of making any sort of agreement, in my opinion. After all,
He
what they're
can't.
gonna get, they cannot change the reality of what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz. So it's
Mhm.
gonna stay under the control of Iranian government. They're gonna compensate the cost of war and what has happened, devastation in Iran, by what they're gonna charge. Mostly the GCC countries in the Persian Gulf, charge
Yes.
them because of the war, the devastation of the war. That's gonna be, and I don't see Donald Trump being capable of, you know, removing the sanctions on Iran. They're not gonna do that. I
He
don't see that
can't
happening.
because it's Congress, and the U.S. Congress will never remove these sanctions. These are eternal. Exactly.
Yeah. This is gonna be some sort of ending a conflict or some sort of ceasefire, or we can put it this way, without reaching a major agreement between the two parties. But the reality is that Donald Trump cannot do anything else more than that. Because if they get back to the war, that's not going to change the battlefield. I don't see anything happening in his favor, even with the ground invasion of Iran. What are they going to achieve? It's going to
Exactly.
be more casual.
And it's not going to change anything in Hormuz. It's not going to bring a regime change. Exactly. And it's going to be an enormous humiliation because there will be a lot of body bags if they try.
It's gonna be, and the Iranian know how to fight on the ground, Pepe. They're
On the
so
ground,
good.
yeah.
They're so good. I
Yes.
saw this with my eyes. I don't
You
know
saw
how
it,
capable
exactly.
they are. That's why I don't like this happening, because we don't need these sort of casualties. We don't need this sort of killing happening on the battlefield, on the ground, because that's enough. The air bombing, the recent raid of the U.S. raid on Iran has shown the capabilities of Iran, even
Mhm.
in a location that it was somehow a surprise attack, by the way. But
Yes.
Iran had managed to respond to the United States in a way that even Donald Trump himself can understand. He needs explain the whole operation more than an hour. He has never done such a thing. Just look at the
Yeah.
history of.
Yeah.
He was just explaining each and every detail. You have to understand what is happening, what has happened, that Donald Trump needs to go that far to explain what has happened during the operation. And I think we're going to learn it as time goes by. We're going to learn what was the reality, which is closer to what we understand from the raid, not the
Mhm.
rescue operation.
Mhm.
What Donald Trump is trying to do right now is putting pressure again on NATO. And he's asking desperately, as he tried to
Yeah.
negotiate with the ceasefire, asking desperately for, asking NATO countries to send, forces in the Middle East, in the Strait of Hormuz. I don't know how in the world he's feeling that the situation has changed, or Europe would change its mind toward the Strait of Hormuz. You're
They're,
understanding?
they're scared to death. First of all, they don't have the weapons and the forces for that. Second, they're scared to death. Third, NATO is imploding from within, just like the EU. It's the same thing. Um, by the way, this visit of that absolutely repulsive Dutchman leading NATO, he was asked directly about the extermination of civilization post, and obviously he dodged the question. He didn't answer, and he said, I absolutely support President Trump. So how can you how we should interpret this, and there's no other interpretation, that NATO basically condones and supports genocide. Not only the genocide in Gaza, we already knew that, but this threat of exterminating a whole civilization by the President of the United States. And this idiot, not even, I would say he's not even, he's even worse. He's much worse than that. I cannot say it because it's censored. He basically says, yeah, I agree with it. So this is the official European elite position on genocide of the other, in a Lévi-Strauss sense, anywhere, as long as they are not European. It's extremely worrying because it's a mix of extreme arrogance, absolutely pitiless view of the world, morally bankrupt, spiritually bankrupt, and at the same time, cowardice. Okay, yeah, you don't agree with the Strait of Hormuz? Okay, go over there with your fleet and try to unblock it yourself. Of course not. They're cowards. They'll never do it. And on that, at least, Trump is calling their cowardice. They said, look, you have to, you're not happy with it. You have a few days to send a fleet to unblock Hormuz. Is it going to happen? Of course not. Everybody knows it's not going to happen. So they can only posture in their mix of aggressiveness and extreme cowardice. And of course, morally bankrupt to the Milky Way already. It's absolutely disgusting. But it's good to have once in a while these crystal clear photographs, or instant photographs of the psyche of the collective West. And this was another case,
Pepe, the other point that was so much interesting, it was the panic. Since they announced the ceasefire, it was a panic in Israel, in the Persian Gulf, in GCC countries. They were in panic. You saw what has happened. I think the attack on the way that Israel attacked Lebanon is out of panic, is not out of strength.
It is blind rage. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely correct. Yeah. And the UAE is it's complicated, Nima. They are at war with Iran side by side with Israel. So Iran will have to deal with the UAE, I would say sooner rather than later, in a very, very hardcore way. And of course, we all knew that they were part of the Zionist axis. We all knew that those promises of investment in the American economy and all that. We all know that Dubai and Abu Dhabi are extensions of the Empire of Chaos and of the Epstein syndicate interests. But now they are at war de facto against Iran. So, they didn't even comment on those meetings in Islamabad or the ceasefire, where we have a lot of Muslim countries involved. We had Turkey, Egypt, etc. The UAE, Saudi Arabia is that. So how to deal with Saudi Arabia? And Saudi Arabia is a full member of BRICS. How are China and Russia going to deal with the UAE right now? And they are at war with a full BRICS member, Iran. So this is going to be one of the, I would say, most complicated issues from now on. And Iran has to find a way to immobilize the UAE, immobilize and marginalize the UAE. This is going to be very difficult, especially because they have a lot of Iranian money over there, right, Nima?
Yeah.
And well, if they really promise that they're going to confiscate Iranian assets in Dubai, this will be the straw breaking the Emirati camel's back. You're going to confiscate your money? Okay, just wait. What's going to happen to your oil industry?
I think they're gonna, if they continue with this sort of attitude and getting closer to Israel and attacking Iran, they're gonna be disappeared from the scene in the Middle East. I'm not talking about the country. I'm talking about the leadership and the people who join the Omani government. I see they're gonna be much more better position if they join Oman and be, they're part of Oman. They
It's
were
what the Iraqi scholars. I love those Iraqi scholars. This is what they have been saying for a few weeks now. Eventually, the only thing, the only place for them to go was back to Oman.
exactly, exactly. That's why we had General Kane Pepe
Mm,
in that in the briefing of Donald Trump, the way that he was mentioning what has happened in Iran. He said something so important, I think, that each and everybody in Iran was hitting at us with rifle, with small guns, with, and this shows how they have been deceived somehow. They have
yeah.
been by, I don't know, Mossad, by CIA, that they thought that really Iranians would welcome them to invade their countries. This is huge, Pepe. This
Of
is
course, but this is Zionist disinformation, which is it's something they excel in. They are masters of disinformation. They are very good at infiltrating. They are very good at cultivating fifth columns, and that's it. And then they are very good on the PR department to sell that to gullible Americans, including gullible American politicians, especially gullible American politicians. It's what they do best. The problem is when they actually infiltrate. For instance, they infiltrated Hezbollah, and they infiltrated, I would say, probably a few sectors of the IRGC. This is very, very worrying, extremely worrying.
you know what's yeah, I think you're right. And on the other hand, you see the same thing happening in IDF. They have spies, Iranian spies in IDF, and today we've learned another spy was, somehow they found another spy, Iranian spy in these IDF forces. But the problem is, or the difference is, Iran doesn't seek any sort of assassination, or they're
Assassination.
mostly basically they want to find something strategically, find something that is important for their operation to go against Israel. But on the part of Israelis, whenever they manage to find someone to spy for them, they want to find the location of the leadership, the location of the people to assassinate them. Nothing beyond that is happening. That's why you see two different attitudes on the part of Iranians and Israelis. They're basically mostly their policy is based on assassinations. On the
Yes.
other hand, you see, even we had the documents coming out of Demona. You remember that?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, yeah. They look for privileged information. And the Israelis is just, okay, we found this guy, let's kill him. That's it. There's nothing strategic about it. Absolutely, the approaches are completely different.
And that's works perfectly for their propaganda, that they're capable, they're doing this and that, they're assassinating the leadership. Even with the briefing yesterday, Pete Hegseth was mentioning, we have destroyed many of leadership in Iran, together with equipment, together with their army. This is some sort of propaganda machine for the mainstream media. And Iran doesn't need that, because they don't have the dominance over the mainstream media.
Exactly. Yeah.
Pepe,
Another question.
go
Yes,
ahead.
if you allow me, a very quick one. As you see it, would you say that Iran is not attacking Israel directly as harshly as they could? It's like they are refraining a little bit, and maybe in a later stage they will go for the kill. But for the moment, it's just like compared to the amount of destruction that they wreaked on the American military bases and on many installations across the Persian Gulf. So when you compare to the direct strikes against Israel, I would say there's an element of suspicion. It could be much harder than that.
Yeah, definitely, because they're trying to be measured in the way that they're responding to Israel. They don't want to go 100% on Israel. They don't want to reveal everything. That's why they're talking about, we have surprises. If the escalation continues, we have the surprises coming. They know what they're talking about, but they don't want to use them. They don't want to put them out, because that would reveal everything you have. That's why you strategically thinking you're not going to do that to yourself, because you disarm yourself before using them.
Mhm.
That's what the reality. Because one part of the attack on Demona, you know,
Mhm.
they just attacked Demona just to show the Israelis, the
Yeah, it was
Americans, that
a
they can hit
demonstration,
the
right?
target.
Yeah. Yeah.
They can
Mhm.
hit the target. They can hit everything in Israel. You
Mhm.
know, there are a lot of surprises on the part of the Iranian army if they continue, because they were talking about it. They were honest about it. Everything they said, they meant it. They used it.
Mhm.
So I have no doubt that they have a lot in their arsenal to be used against Israel and against an American aggression if the war continues. And this is somehow it seems to me that Donald Trump has perceived that so far. I don't know how deep is that, but let's see.
Yeah. Well, certainly nobody in his mediocre entourage, and himself is, because he's fed extremely filtered information every day, Nima. He never knows anything in depth about what's going on in the battlefield, not to mention the political chessboard. He has no idea. And of course, the people around, because they are so mediocre, sycophants and ass lickers, so he can never have a true picture on any front whatsoever. The only thing that he actually pays attention to, and we know by observing how he reacts, is the stock market, the oil market, and the bond market. That's, apart from that, nothing else.
If he was a wise person, I would say he would just dismiss Pete Hegseth right away, right now, because Pete Hegseth is one of the biggest problem. The guy comes out just, it seems like he's playing a movie. It's something like that. He's not real. The guy is not real,
Oh,
in my
and
opinion.
childish, horribly misinformed, prejudiced, with the brains of a 4-year-old once again, etc. You can imagine this guy is making decisions for the whole gigantic Pentagon machine. No wonder these generals, most of these generals are they are appalled, and there's nothing they can do about
Exactly.
it.
Pepe, I think how do you see the way that China and Russia see the reality of the Strait of Hormuz? Do you think China has some sort of difficulty with the Strait of Hormuz, or
Yes.
Russia, the way that Russia sees that? Go ahead, your understanding
No,
of it.
Russia. No, Russia. They're reaping the benefits because they're selling oil like crazy. So for them, this is it's a perfect arrangement, right?
Yeah.
China is it's immensely complicated. For instance, I spend a lot of time reading some of the best Chinese analysts, translated from Mandarin to English, no? And they are too cautious. Most of them. I am generalizing a little bit, but among the best ones, Fudan University, Renmin University, Tsinghua, etc. They still hold the U.S. in. They still deal with U.S. with some sort of awe. They are still under, all that glimmer and glitz of the superpower, and some of their analysis are conditioned by what they learn from American mainstream media. It's horrible. They're Chinese analysts. Once again, this I'm not talking about all of them. Uh, I like the really radical ones, but there are not many, because in China, as you know, the directive in terms of what can be published in China, they are very strict, and you have to strictly align uh, with the Minister of Information, with the Minister of Foreign Relations, etc. So deviations, it's very, very hard. So in terms of independent critical thinking, is very, very hard. So when you find a Chinese analyst that breaks with the mold, it's a breath of fresh air, but there are not many, unfortunately, right? For instance, many of them, they still don't understand the proxy war in Ukraine in detail, and they should. It's their neighbor. And in Iran, they, of course, their main worry is China energy security. So most of the discussion is focused on China energy security. And of course, you won't get any information on how China is actually helping Iran in practical terms. It's very hard to get that. You have nuggets here and there, right? So, and now they are in an extremely complex position because as much as some elements of the semi-closed Strait of Hormuz help China in terms of the petro yuan, payment on SIPs, etc., not all the tankers going to China are passing through the Strait of Hormuz. So China is getting less energy via the Strait of Hormuz than before, and they have to compensate that. Of course, they have different sources. Gas, they can get more gas from Turkmenistan. They can get more gas from Power of Siberia. They can get more gas from Myanmar. It's possible. Oil, they can get more oil from Kazakhstan, the pipelines that arrive in Xinjiang. But obviously, they were always counting on that free flow of energy via the Persian Gulf, not only from Iran, but from the other Persian Gulf players. So they are squeezed into a complicated position. And at the same time, they don't want to antagonize the US frontally. That's not the Chinese diplomatic playing goal kind of way. But at the same time, they're doing the best they can to profit from the situation because they see the empire enfeebled, going crazy, and this provoked by a mid-sized power, not even a superpower. It's not China or Iran, or Russia. It's Iran, mid-sized power. So they're trying to profit from it as best as they can. But it's a very complicated position. And this decision that they made to suggest to Iran, go to Islamabad and try to examine where this ceasefire comes from and where it could possibly lead. This is a very risky position because now China is directly implicated in this process. Directly. This was China telling Iran. It was not China telling Pakistan. That's a completely different story. Before, it was the Muslim countries, Pakistan, they went to China. Remember the first time when the foreign minister, Dar, the foreign minister of Pakistan, went to Beijing to talk to Wang Yi, and they had that 5-point blend declaration about peace. Blah, blah, blah. That led to nowhere. But this time, the negotiation this past 2 or 3 days, the Chinese at the last minute, they suggested to Iran explicitly, go to Islamabad. So now they have skin in the game. And they have to assure, of course, you won't see that in Chinese media anywhere. But basically, they told Iran, look, we're going to be your guarantor in the back, whatever happens. And obviously, Tehran agreed. So there will come a time, if things start to derail, Tehran is going to pick up the phone to Beijing. I said, okay, where is your help now? So China now is in a very delicate position, which they were not only a few days ago. And I was trying to find nuggets about that on Guansha. I follow Guansha a lot. So they republished my articles. I met the director in Shanghai and all that. I couldn't read anywhere, even 1 or 2 paragraphs talking about this new Chinese position. So it's complicated, Nima, and all of you, our audience, to follow China as a foreigner. It's extremely complicated. So it depends on us cultivating our establishing relationships of trust, which is something that I have been doing for years, in fact. But this takes time. You know, you have to meet them in person. It's not on email. No, you have to go there. Then you have a lunch together. Then you discuss off the record. So when they start trusting you, then you start getting privileged information. But this is a long process.
Because they're not that much vocal about what
No,
they're thinking. And
they are
this is
not, but not at all. But this is the way the Chinese deal with extremely sensitive foreign policy issues. This applies to everything. And so in some cases, this is something that I heard. I cannot say, I heard from diplomatic sources. I cannot say where from. They told me, look, sometimes the Chinese bet on the wrong horses and they don't know it. And when they discover it, it's too late. This has nothing to do with Iran. They know exactly who they're dealing with because there is a strategic relationship. There is this 400 billion long 25-year plan, energy infrastructure. It's different. And Iran is the key Chinese ally, I would say, in the western part of Eurasia. No question about that. That's different. But they refuse to be directly involved, and especially now, directly involved in a war, and it's not their war. Ultimately, it's an indirect war against them as well, because if Iran falls, no question, they lose their major ally in West Asia. This would be a mega blow for the Chinese, and they know it very well. So they have to protect their ally. So the most challenging aspect is that it's very hard to know how far will they go. None of us know. You see? But I'm sure the conversation at the highest levels between Tehran and Beijing, it's very good. It's very good. This helps. No?
I think before wrapping up, Pepe, I think it's just we have to see the alternative in the West Asia. This war has diminished the picture of GCC countries in the eyes of Russians and Chinese. That's a huge factor right now.
Enormous. Wow. Especially because we have one of them is a BRICS member. And in Egypt, which is close by, is also a BRICS member. And Saudi Arabia is on the fence. We don't know what Saudi Arabia is. Is Saudi Arabia in BRICS or not? They don't know because they are hedging so much. No? But we already see the split, Nima. And I'm sure all of you, our audience, are already split. Qatar and Oman, they already made very clear that they will align with Iran, whatever happens next. So that's so the GCC is already broken in half. Bahrain is broke, right? And the whole thing is collapsing. So Bahrain has no future. Bahrain is a non-player in the future of the GCC. Kuwait still hangs in the balance. They could be reabsorbed to Iraq in the near future. Everything is possible. So the once again, the big problem is, okay, what about Saudi Arabia and the Emirates? And the Emirates is not the whole thing. No? We're talking basically, for instance, Sharjah, cool. Fujairah, cool. The problem is Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Dubai, the business model is dead. We already know that. And we don't know if they'll be able to reinvent themselves. Doing what? Nobody will want to live in Dubai anymore or do business in Dubai. Forget it. And Saudi Arabia. That's the key of the whole story. And MBS has some very serious decisions ahead. Everything that he promised to the Trump administration, all the deals are related to the IMEC corridor, which has collapsed, everything related to the Abraham Accords and all that. This whole thing is collapsing in front of them. So how they're going to, we don't know how they're going to play their next hand. And they don't have many cards in their hands.
No, exactly.
But it's already split. But GCC is already a mess, Nima. Right? It's already split.